Welcome back to Why Killers Kill. Today, we are opening one of the most chilling case files in modern history. Dennis Rader, the man who called himself BTK.
This isn't just about the crimes, Dan. It's about the man who was a church president, a husband, and a father, while also being a monster.
Exactly. Our deep dive today is guided by Dr. Katherine Ramsland's incredible book, Confession of a Serial Killer, which was built from years of direct correspondence with Rader himself.
It's a guided autobiography, giving us a terrifying look straight into the mind of the killer. Let's start where he did, his childhood.
On the surface, Dennis Rader's childhood in 1950s Kansas seems almost idyllic. He was the oldest of 4 boys in a seemingly normal, church-going family.
But normal is often just a mask, isn't it? The book shows that even then there were red flags.
Definite red flags. Rader himself points to small, strange events that he later identified as the first inklings of his dark side.
Like seeing his mother get her hand briefly stuck in a sofa. For him, that image of a trapped woman sparked something.
And on his grandparents' farm, he was fascinated by watching chickens being hung up before they were killed. That visual of helpless, bound creatures stuck with him.
He also developed a secret fetish for his mother's and grandmother's underwear and started spying on women. This is classic voyeurism and fetishism developing early.
He also read detective magazines, becoming obsessed with a killer named Harvey Glattman, who tied up and photographed his victims.
So he's collecting data. He's finding role models and building the architecture for his fantasy world, long before he ever acts on it.
He even started practicing tying himself up, autoerotic asphyxiation, which he combined with his voyeurism. The link between bondage, control, and sexual excitement was cemented.
It's chilling, because there was no spectacular trauma. This darkness grew organically within a seemingly average American kid.
Let's move into his psychological profile. Rader had his own terms for his inner world, which Ramsland's book decodes for us.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of the case. He didn't just have a dark side. He gave it a name and a rule book.
He called his compulsion Factor X. He described it as an external demonic force that lived inside him and drove him to do these terrible things.
Which is a classic psychological defense. By naming it something separate, he absolved himself of full responsibility. It wasn't him, it was Factor X.
Then there's his concept of cubing. He imagined his mind was a cube he could mentally turn, hiding the black hat killer side from the white hat family man side.
It's his word for compartmentalization. It allowed him to be the president of his church congregation while simultaneously planning the murder of his neighbor.
Experts, including Ramsland, diagnose him with a severe narcissistic personality disorder. Everything was about his ego, his power, and his need for recognition.
And that narcissism is key. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted credit. He wanted to be famous for it, comparing himself to Jack the Ripper and Ted Bundy.
He also had a set of codes. PJs were his projects or potential victims he would stalk. SBT stood for Sparky Big Time, meaning something gave him a major thrill.
He built an entire private language around his pathology. It shows how incredibly deep and structured his fantasy life was.
He wasn't crazy in the legal sense. He was organized, meticulous, and fully aware of what he was doing. His evil was structured.
The structure is what's so terrifying. It wasn't a loss of control. It was the ultimate, horrifying form of control.
So how does this man, living deep in his fantasy world, finally cross the line into actual violence?
There's almost always a trigger. For Rader, it was a profound narcissistic injury.
In October 1973, he was laid off from his job at the Cessna Aircraft Company. In his own words to Ramsland, "My world was crushed. I went to the dark side."
That loss of status and control was unbearable for his ego. The fantasies that had been enough for years suddenly weren't. He needed to reclaim a sense of power in the real world.
He had a wife, a stable life, but that job loss seems to have been the crack in the dam.
It wasn't an excuse, but a catalyst. The bomb was already built. The layoff just lit the fuse.
Just 3 months later, in January 1974, he would commit his first and most infamous crime.
The path was set. The white hat side was no longer in charge.
Let's talk about the crimes themselves. We'll be direct but sensitive, focusing on the facts and his modus operandi.
It's important to remember the victims here. They were not projects. They were people whose lives were stolen to feed a fantasy.
On January 15, 1974, Rader broke into the home of the Otero family. He murdered Joseph, Julie, and their 2 young children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine.
He used a ruse, telling them he was a wanted man who just needed food and a car. This got them to comply without an initial struggle.
His method was what would eventually give him his name. He bound them, tortured them psychologically, and killed them.
The murder of 11-year-old Josephine was the climax of his fantasy. He took her to the basement and killed her in a way that mirrored the images that had been in his head since childhood.
Just a few months later, in April 1974, he attacked Katherine Bright, but this one went wrong.
Her brother Kevin was unexpectedly home. A violent struggle broke out. Rader shot Kevin, and he ended up stabbing Katherine instead of strangling her. Kevin survived.
This deviation from his preferred method meant police didn't initially connect her murder to the Otero case. Rader was furious he wasn't getting the credit.
And that narcissistic rage led him to make his next move. He contacted the media.
He hid a letter in a library book, directing a journalist to it. In that letter, he took credit for the Otero murders and named himself BTK. Bind, torture, kill.
The cat-and-mouse game had begun. This was as important to him as the murders themselves.
He would go on to kill Shirley Vian in 1977, while her young children were locked in the bathroom nearby.
The cruelty is almost incomprehensible. He was a master at terror.
That same year, he murdered Nancy Fox. Then, his communications became more brazen, sending poems and letters to news stations.
He was building his own legend, taunting the police and basking in the fear he created.
After Nancy Fox, there was a long gap until 1985, when he murdered his neighbor, Maureen Hedge. He took her body to the church where he was president to photograph her.
The audacity of that. To defile the very center of his white hat life. It's the ultimate proof that his cubing was a lie. The two sides were never really separate.
His next victim was Vicki Wegerle in 1986, and his last was Dolores Davis in 1991. After that, he went silent for over a decade.
But he didn't stop. He channeled his urges into elaborate self-bondage sessions he called motel parties, using trophies from his victims to fuel his fantasies.
The monster didn't go away. He just went back into his cage, waiting.
And it would be his own ego that would eventually lure him back out.
Which brings us to his capture, For 30 years, BTK was Wichita's boogeyman, a ghost. Then, in 2004, he made his grand return.
What prompted it?
A local newspaper ran a 30th anniversary story on the Otero murders, speculating that BTK was dead or in prison. It also mentioned a book was being written about him.
His worst nightmare. Someone else telling his story. He couldn't let that stand.
So, to prove he was still out there, he mailed a package containing evidence from the 1986 Vicki Wegerle murder, a crime that hadn't been linked to BTK.
He reopened his own cold case. The narcissism is just staggering.
This kicked off a year-long media blitz. He left cereal boxes with dolls inside, sent puzzles to TV stations, and communicated constantly with police and reporters.
He was having the time of his life, viewing lead investigator Ken Landwehr as his worthy adversary in a grand game.
And that led to his fatal mistake. He sent a message to police asking a simple question. Can I communicate with a floppy disk without it being traced?
Oh, you just can't make this up. It's like a movie.
The police, brilliantly, placed a hidden message in a newspaper ad saying, "Rex, it will be okay." Rex was one of his chosen code names.
They lied to him. They played directly to his ego, telling him what he wanted to hear.
He took the bait. He sent them a floppy disk. Police forensic experts examined it and found metadata from a deleted document.
And what did the metadata say?
It showed the document was last modified by an author named Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church.
Oh my God. He handed them his own name and address on a silver platter.
A quick search showed the church president was a man named Dennis Rader. To confirm it, they got a warrant for his daughter's DNA from a recent pap smear on file at a clinic.
And it was a familial match to the DNA left at the crime scenes.
It was a match. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was pulled over and arrested during his lunch break. The 30-year reign of terror was over.
Brought down by a Microsoft Word document. Hubris, pure and simple.
Once confronted with the evidence, he confessed to everything in a chillingly calm, detailed 30-hour interrogation. He pled guilty to 10 counts of murder.
And his family? His wife, Paula?
She was granted an emergency divorce. She and their 2 children were completely blindsided. The wall of his cube had crumbled, and they were left in the rubble.
I can't even imagine the shock. The man they knew simply never existed.
Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, one for each of his victims. His legacy, the one he so desperately wanted, was cemented as one of profound failure.
He wanted to be a legend like Bundy. Instead, he became a cautionary tale about ego.
So, after all this, we come to the core question of our show. Why did he kill?
Based on Ramsland's work and Rader's own words, it's a toxic cocktail of 3 main ingredients: fantasy, control, and narcissism.
Let's break that down. First, fantasy addiction.
He was, in essence, an addict. His drug was a very specific sexual fantasy involving the bondage and helplessness of women. For years, he could get his fix through voyeurism and autoeroticism.
But like any addiction, his tolerance grew. Eventually, the fantasy wasn't enough. He had to act it out in reality to get the same high.
The murder itself was almost secondary. It was the process, the stalking, the binding, the terror that fulfilled the fantasy. The killing was just the final necessary step.
The second ingredient, an overwhelming need for control.
Absolutely. He felt powerless in his own life, especially after being laid off. The BTK persona gave him ultimate control. He controlled his victims' lives, the police investigation, and the city's emotions.
The ropes and the tape were literal symbols of that control. He was tying up not just his victims, but all the loose ends of his own inadequacy.
He even tried to control the narrative after his capture, which is why he agreed to work with Ramsland on the book. He was still trying to be the one in charge of his story.
And the final, and perhaps most important ingredient, his profound narcissism.
This is the engine that drove everything. A normal person's fantasy is private. Rader's narcissism demanded an audience. He didn't just want to be a killer. He wanted to be known as a great killer.
That's why he gave himself a name, sent letters, and taunted the media. It was a branding exercise.
A serial killer marketing campaign. It's grotesque, but that's what it was. He needed the fame and notoriety to validate his sense of superiority.
And that need for fame is what brought him down. If he had just stayed quiet after 1991, he might never have been caught.
But his ego couldn't handle being forgotten. He had to come back for one last curtain call. And that's when he tripped on his own cape.
So, to summarize the why, he was a fantasy addict who needed to act out rituals of control, and his narcissism demanded that the world watch and applaud him for it.
He called it Factor X, but there was nothing mystical about it. It was a textbook storm of human pathology.
As we wrap up, let's reflect on the legacy of this case.
To me, the most enduring lesson from Dennis Rader is the terrifying power of compartmentalization. The idea that evil can wear such a convincing mask of normalcy.
He wasn't a shadowy figure lurking in the alleys. He was your neighbor, your scout leader, the man passing the collection plate at church.
It shatters the comfortable illusion that we can spot a monster in a crowd. Sometimes the monster is the most average-looking person in the room.
And the case is a powerful testament to police patience and ingenuity. They didn't catch him with a gunfight. They caught him by understanding his psychology.
They knew his ego was his Achilles heel, and they targeted it perfectly. It was a psychological trap for a psychological killer.
Even in prison, writing with Ramsland, he's still trying to analyze himself, to understand Factor X, but he never fully takes responsibility.
Because a true narcissist can't. In his mind, the inner minotaur, as he calls it, is still a separate being. He can't integrate the fact that he is the monster.
He once said, "I'm a good person who did some bad things." That sentence right there tells you everything you need to know.
It's a chilling and vital story. It reminds us to honor the victims. Joseph, Julie, Josephine, Joseph Jr., Katherine, Shirley, Nancy, Maureen, Vicky, and Dolores.
Their lives mattered far more than the twisted legacy he tried to build.
And that legacy ended up being one of pathetic failure, undone by his own desperate need for attention.
Once again, the book is Confession of a Serial Killer by Katherine Ramsland, a difficult but essential read.
It's a journey into darkness, but one that holds powerful lessons about the human psyche.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the mind of a killer.
It's a story that will stick with you. That's for sure.
The details are just mind-boggling. The level of planning.
And the sheer luck he had for so many years, so many close calls.
Like when his wife, Paula, almost discovered his kill kit. He managed to talk his way out of it.
Or the time she came home and found him in full bondage gear. He promised to stop, but just got better at hiding it.
His ability to lie and manipulate was as honed as his ability to tie knots.
That's the core of the narcissistic personality. The world is just a stage, and everyone else is just an actor in their play.
He even tried to co-opt the story of a local teen suicide during his 2004 media blitz, claiming the boy was his secret apprentice.
There's no depth he wouldn't sink to for more attention. It's pathological.
The Motherlode, his name for his collection of trophies and drawings, was everything to him.
It was his altar, where he would go to worship his own darkness and relive his greatest hits.
And yet, he worked as a compliance officer, a dog catcher, a man who enforced petty rules.
It makes a sick kind of sense, though. It's a low-level form of authority, a little taste of the control he craved to tide him over between kills.
He was a square peg, as he put it, trying to fit into a round world.
But he wasn't a victim of circumstance. He carved his own square hole with a trail of bodies.
The final image from the book is Rader's dream about being caught, which he had before his arrest.
Even in his subconscious, his ego was the star. The dream wasn't about remorse. It was about the drama of the chase.
It truly is one of the most well-documented cases of a serial killer's inner world we'll ever have.
Thanks to Dr. Ramsland's work, she navigated the mind of a master manipulator to bring us the story.
It's a story that serves as a stark warning.
That the call can be coming from inside the house, metaphorically, and sometimes literally.
He was the killer next door, in the most literal sense of the phrase.
A predator hiding in plain sight for 3 decades.
The banality of his public life is what makes his private actions so profoundly monstrous.
A perfect, horrifying cube.
His story is a chilling reminder of the dark capabilities hidden within the human psyche.
And a reminder of the quiet strength of the victims, and the tenacity of the investigators who finally brought him to justice.
He thought he was writing his own epic story.
But in the end, the story wrote him, a pathetic footnote in the annals of crime.
It's a complex and deeply unsettling case that we could talk about for hours.
But the main takeaways are clear. Ego can be a killer's undoing, and normalcy can be the most terrifying mask of all.
We hope this discussion provided some insight into the why behind one of America's most infamous killers.
A chilling but necessary conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Why Killers Kill.
What do you think is the most chilling aspect of the BTK case? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and share.